Listen, life's all about leveling up. Whether you're handling business on the field or kicking it in your zone, you like to celebrate with cigars that match the moment. That's why you should link up with Famous Cigars to bring you a wild deal. Right now, you can grab 8 premium cigars for just $8. You heard that right. 8 top-rated cigars at $1 a stick. Top quality brands like Oliva, Romeo y Julieta, and Davidoff. Handpicked just for you and worth over $80. Hit up famouscigars.com/cam and lock in this exclusive deal. While you're there, check out their insane selection of premium cigars, all shipped fresh and fast from their massive 20,000 square foot humidor. That's half a football field. Famous Cigars has been in the game since 1939 and still family owned. So celebrate every win with the folks at Famous. 8 cigars for $8. famouscigars.com/cam.
Let's be honest. Shopping, not my thing. I go to the store. There's a lot of people that, it's just not my thing. It's not football. All right. I spend way too long scrolling websites just looking for something simple like a nice pair of jeans. And I'm either overwhelmed by all the choices or can't find anything my style and end up with stuff that doesn't fit and doesn't work. That's why I use Stitch Fix. You just take a quick style quiz, share your size, your vibe, and your budget, and boom, you're matched with a real human stylists who handle the rest. They take care of the work for you. They send you a fix box with clothes that actually fit and make sense for your life, work, weekends, whatever. It saves you time. You look great, and you don't even have to think about it. That's the best part. It's no risk, all style. Try it all on in the comfort of your home. Keep what works, send back the rest. Free shipping and returns, always, and no subscription required. Plus, get a free try-on for your first fix. Get started today at stitchfix.com/podcast to get $20 off your first order, and they'll waive your styling fee. That's stitchfix.com/podcast.
What's up, y'all? It's Drewski, and I've teamed up with Mountain Dew to produce a hilarious new basketball podcast called The Dew Zone with Drewski. Learn the backstories of your favorite ballers and celebrities like Jamal Murray.
Did you have like a favorite team? Was it the Raptors at the time or no? Was the Raptors even started around that time?
Come on, bro. I ain't that old, fam. You talking like I'm 50.
Taylor Rooks, Asia Wilson, and many more. You won't want to miss this. Listen to The Dew Zone with Drewski on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts.
The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to the Timeline, a Phoenix Suns podcast. What a week for the Suns. Last week on this podcast, we talked about the 3 games the Suns were going to face. A big test, essentially. Utah, Denver, back-to-back on the road, and then the LA Clippers. The Suns got out of it 2-1 with a semi-heroic effort against the Clippers. My name is Mike. I'm here with Sam. Sam, how are you doing?
I'm wonderful. This was almost a very depressing episode.
Yeah,
because we were kind of like, God, why did we decide to record after the Clippers game? Because they were down
at halftime.
31.
I texted you.
Yeah, you texted me. You texted me being like, we just had to do it. We couldn't have done it after the Denver game when everyone would have been amped up and listen. Now, given the heroic effort, in case you didn't watch the game last night against the Clippers, the Suns were down 31 early in the game. They did lose, but only by 5. It was a valiant effort. And so I think people are going to still be pretty excited. Technically, the Suns are still tied for the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. They're not the sole owner of that seed anymore. But fans still have many, many reasons to be excited about this team. And I think later on in this episode, we're going to start by recapping the game they just played last night, even despite the disappointing finish. But then we're also just going to talk about some of the general principles that we've seen in this team through 7 games now, that have made them not just a middling playoff team in the Western Conference, but actually one of the best ones.
Down by 31 early in this game. which I thought was really interesting. And there's a lot of things I think we could talk about from that specific part of the game. But I just want to ask you in a general sense, why do you think the Suns went down by 31?
Yeah, I mean,
their
execution was absolutely horrific. I honestly don't know what it was. I do know what it was. First of all, I thought their half-court offense in the first half of that game was actually pretty good and was kind of working by design. We've seen this year that the Suns are, at least, I don't know if the stats are going to update and be different after the Clippers game. We're recording right after the game, so we don't have the most up-to-date to-the-minute stats. But at least as of earlier today, the Suns were 30th in the league in pace. And I think some of the downsides that we've seen were kind of clear in the first half of this game because they were running this very deliberate offense. They were getting good looks. They were working to find the mismatch against the Clippers. And then, honestly, they were getting a lot of open shots. They were just missing them. The problem is the Clippers, with the personnel that they have between Patrick Beverley, Serge Ibaka, not to mention Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, when you're working that hard in your half-court offense to try and draw those mismatches on them, you can get points that way, and the Suns did get some points that way, but it can't be the be-all, end-all of your offense. You need to get stops on them against defense. You need to get out and run and get some transition buckets. If you're going to be missing shots in the half-court on offense, you absolutely need to crash the offensive glass. And so in the first half of the game, when the Suns were down 31, they had one offensive rebound, the entire roster in the entire first half. Patrick Beverley had 2 offensive rebounds in the first half. Outdid the entire Suns roster. And then in the second half, when the Suns started catching up, you saw DeAndre Ayton. He finished the game with 4 offensive rebounds. We're going to talk about him, I'm sure. He was great. Other guys, too. Dario Saric had some. It was a collective team effort to get stops and to crash the glass. They just didn't get enough stops because Paul George went thermonuclear.
I'll say this, too, just to add to it. Something as simple as this. Going into this game, I'm not sure if the NBA stats have updated. I didn't write down this stat before the game, but going into this game, the Suns were averaging opponent three-point attempts were 28 three-point attempts for an entire game. The Clippers were 10 for 20 in that first half alone from the three-point line. As good as the defense has been for the Suns so far, a lot of your defense, a lot of teams' defense in the NBA against the three-pointers and against the three-point line, by all advanced metrics, kind of is random. There are games where teams will hit three-pointers on you. There are games where they'll just miss a bunch, like the Suns did in the first half of this game, where they made 2, I believe. Maybe 3 by the end of the second quarter. But what you can do on defense against three-pointers is you can try to limit the amount of three-point attempts the other team is taking. You can try to force them to be from guys that maybe are their worst three-point players, like the Bucks are famous for playing a style of defense that packs the paint and specifically allows them other teams to shoot a lot of three-pointers, but tries to focus those three-pointers to be from the worst three-point shooters in the other team, which is interesting. The Suns so far had done a really good job limiting just the total amount of three-point attempts that were taken against them. But the Clippers, it didn't work on them. Whatever they were doing didn't work. I think it would be an interesting game to go back and rewatch to see exactly why that is. But they hit shots the Suns didn't. And I think a lot of that hole that they found themselves in at the beginning was that. I think a little bit of it is DeAndre Ayton has been pretty good in all the games that sort of... The Utah game was a little shaky. The Denver game was interesting. We're going to talk a little bit more about him later. But in a lot of the games, his focus is off at the beginning of games, and then he gets progressively better as the games go on. And I think this game, the defense was off at the beginning of the game, partially because he was off at the beginning of the game. And he's so important for that defense because he's the last line at that rim, that if he's off, it can throw everyone off a little bit. And that means shots start falling because everyone's collapsing, everyone's a little confused. It looked pretty ugly, though. But I think they figured something out in this game. I actually think that, in a way, this hole was good for them because Devin Booker became a little bit more assertive. He looked really good in this game. I thought the defense really started clamping down. There was ways for this team to win. They can win by hitting a ton of threes. That's going to happen a lot. But they need to figure out how to win very ugly because the teams that win a lot are the teams that can win in a lot of different ways. But I thought as the game went on, after that hole, they started to look a little bit more like the team that we saw early on, and Devin Booker himself started to look a little bit more like him. And look, he played 44 minutes too, by the way. So of course you're going to score more if you just play more minutes. But what did you think about the game after that hole?
Well, it's actually kind of crazy looking at the box score now because I didn't look at it immediately after the game, at least. And yeah, Booker played 45 minutes, like you said. Yeah. He only took 13 shots, but he was very aggressive. You know what we haven't seen from Devin Booker so far this season? He hasn't really been getting to the free throw line. It's not just been a matter of overall his offensive game isn't assertive enough, but especially I think his free throw rate is like half of what it was last year. And another weird thing is kind of an aside. It's weird to see Devin Booker miss free throws. That wasn't really a thing that happened last year, and then this year he's shooting like 70%. I think that's just small sample size and is eventually going to converge back to where we expect it to be. But the point is, Devin Booker tonight, 10 for 12 from the free throw line, and that's with the Clippers respecting him as much as they did, respecting his gravity. I mean, this was the first game, finally, where he broke the turnover spell just a little bit. He had 8 assists to 2 turnovers. He was the engine of the Suns' offense in that second half for sure, and so I really, really do agree with you. I liked what we saw out of him a lot.
Yeah, I thought he turned, 13 shots, 25 points. I mean, that's the type of Devin Booker that we need. But so much of his problems, I think, with scoring, because his scoring was below average, and turnovers, there's a lot of talk about his turnovers and how that's been affecting the team. To me, I'm not super worried about them. In this game, only 2 turnovers. I think a lot of that had to do with him looking for other guys, there being this sort of... before the last season started, once Ricky Rubio was signed, the team was kind of put together. There was one specific goal that Monty gave the team before the season started, and that was to lead the NBA in assists. He wanted them to be the highest assist team in the NBA, which is a good thing to want, right? It's going to be important that they continue to move the ball really well. But I just don't know that that's exactly how you want Devin Booker playing on this specific team. The team is very Chris Paul heavy when Chris Paul is on the floor. And what that means is Chris Paul gets the ball, he walks it down the court, and the first thing he does is dictate exactly where every player needs to be based on the situation in the game. That means that it's going to run relatively slowly. There's not going to be a fast pace. That means that he's calling the plays as far as what will be the best option at that specific time of the game. When Chris Paul is off the floor, Devin Booker's on the floor, he needs to just look for his shot a little bit more. He needs to be a little more selfish. He needs to be a guy who's willing to score a lot of points, because that's what this team is going to need him to do when it really comes down to the wire. And I thought that he did that really well in this game, and I thought just figuring that specific thing out is very important for this team going forward, because he just needs to do it. Now, turnovers-wise, I think there's a huge conversation about his turnovers. I'm just not super worried about it. I think now that he's going to be, if he continues to play like this, if he continues to look for his shot a little bit more, and that means get free throw attempts, by the way. It's not just about the shot. The reason he had 25 points on 13 attempts is because he had 12 free throws. I mean, that's really what it is. If he continues to do that, I think those turnovers will start to go away, and eventually that will turn into more assists as well. I just don't think that assists need to be as high on this team as they were in the previous few seasons for them to still be very good. There's a lot of good passers on this team, Chris Paul being the best. What do you think?
Well, I want to go back to a thing you said before that point, and then I'll address that point too, just as evidence of what you were talking about with the two of them staggering. I know we caution people against using single game plus minus, whatever, but Chris Paul tonight, -8 in 36 minutes. Devin Booker, +14 in 45 minutes. Guess what that means happened in those other 9 minutes? That Booker was playing and Chris Paul was not. The Suns went on a crazy run, and also your guy, Dario Saric. You should run another query looking up his net rating again after this game, because he was a +12 in 17 minutes.
Yeah, and that was after starting out pretty bad.
Yeah, so his net rating is going to continue to be like ridiculous. It's going to be insane. But yeah, just speaking to your point, Booker was aggressive. It worked. I think it's sustainable. And as for the turnovers, I was never worried about those either. Could there be a slight uptick in the adjustment period? Absolutely. But what we've seen so far from him is a guy who's averaging more turnovers than assists. It was never going to continue to be that bad on a long-term basis.
Yeah, and here's the Suns are playing at an incredibly slow pace, as we talked about. Last season, I tweeted this out, but just to repeat it here, because I know a lot of people don't follow me that listen here. Last season, Devin Booker was 10th in the NBA in transition possessions per game at 4.7. That's down, at least before this game. The stats haven't updated yet, to 3.2 this season. And that's 19% of his offense down to 13% of his offense total, which is just the type of thing that starts to affect you over time. I think this is ultimately actually good for the team. I do think that when Chris Paul is off the floor and Devin Booker's running the show a little bit, they need to be more willing to run because he's just a very good transition finisher. He can get to the rim. There's easy buckets to get there when they're running with him and Cameron Payne, who's also fast. I do think going forward in the playoffs, it slows down anyway. In very tight games, it slows down anyway. This is part of the reason I think Chris Paul teams are so good in the clutch, because Chris Paul plays at that slow pace already. He's very familiar with that. It's not something that throws him off in any way. If you rely too much on transition points, it's tough in the clutch. We've seen that with a lot of teams. We saw that with the Suns in the past. We've seen that with the Bucks in the current NBA. Don't rely too much on it. The games will all slow down at some point. You have to have a competent half-court offense. So overall, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think if you're looking at some of Devin Booker's scoring issues, you could point at the fact that they're not running as much, and he's a 100%. Great transition player.
Right.
So he's got to find other ways to score, I guess.
No, I'm glad you brought it up. Something I tweeted today. So, yeah, the Suns are 30th in pace. Again, we bring up that stat a lot. I think just because it's so jarring based on where they were. Like, they were top 10 in the league last year, and I remember specifically when Monty Williams came in and was tapped to be head coach of the Suns, he had run some very slow systems with Chris Paul in New Orleans. And before we knew anything about how Monty Williams would coach in 2019, we kind of questioned if that would be the structure that he decided to install in Phoenix again. And it kind of wasn't with Ricky Rubio. Well, now that the pace has slowed down again, even though the Suns are bottom of the league in pace, they are the slowest team, they are first in transition efficiency in the short sample size that we've seen. A lot of that is, as you said, because Devin Booker is really good. A lot of it is also because Mikal Bridges is really good, really efficient, and you know, kind of to be expected. Like, he's not going to throw it down with like crazy tomahawk slams like a Kelly Oubre, right? Like, he's not a flashy finisher, but he just fills the lane and gets the job done. We've seen him do it as a cutter in the half-court offense, and in the transition now, it's becoming more and more evident that he can very clearly do that as well. Cam Johnson is also a guy who I think is underrated just as a transition. You know, he fills a different type of role, but it's a transition spot-up shooter. So how do you reconcile that? You know, I'll turn it back on you. 30th in the league in pace. First in the league, though, when you do get out and run in transition efficiency, and then kind of to relate it to tonight, the Clippers had 14 fast break points tonight. Phoenix had 2. So, you know, you could talk about half-court offense is something that's very important in the playoffs. The pace slows down. You need to rely more heavily on getting mismatches and isolating. All of that is absolutely true. Maybe you would have won the game tonight, though, if you leaked out a little bit more.
Yeah.
And so I think it is a conversation we should have of where exactly do you strike the balance.
Well, I think we have to talk about something else then that relates to that, and that's rebounding. We had a long conversation early on before the season started about the problems that this team may have with rebounding. And so far, they've been relatively good. They're still close to the bottom of the league in rebounding, but it hasn't affected them in a way that has been like a drastic thing that's affecting wins. And one of the reasons they're capable of doing that is it's not always just DeAndre Ayton going for the rebound. You have 3 or 4 guys that are crashing the boards at a lot of times. If you have 3 or 4 guys that are crashing the boards, it's difficult to get out and run in transition as well. Those two things are very related. And I think they need to continue to gang rebound because DeAndre Ayton can occupy 1 body, maybe 2 in some scenarios, but that's it. Like, he's not going to be capable of stopping, especially on those help defense, which he does do a lot. It's easy for other guys to get in there and grab the boards. So with this team, there needs to be a balance on 2 different things. Rebounding is vital, and I think they need to continue to focus on rebounding. But I also think there is an element of finding the right balance between when Devin Booker is running the show and Chris Paul is running the show. And this happens with every team that has 2 really great players. It takes a little bit of time to find the right balance between those 2 superstars. And I think there is going to be a point in time where it's going to feel a little bit like 2 different teams when Chris Paul is on the floor and then when Devin Booker is on the floor without Chris Paul. when Devin Booker's on the floor without Chris Paul, they need to show a willingness to run a little bit more, especially if they have enough rebounding surrounding him. Maybe that'll help a little bit when somebody like Jalen Smith is healthy and they can get maybe 2 bigs in there. I know that scares some people. I think with Dario Saric, it's not going to be a bit of a problem, but
that does help the
like
rebounding for sure. That would be a plus.
Yeah, so I do think that for Monty Williams, he's got a lot to work with. Like I said, there's enough tools in the toolbox. That's a big phrase that I'm going to say now. It's just about finding the right balance, and you can't do that in practice. You have to play out these games. Everything is different when there's opponents on the floor, and I think they're going to figure things out over time. But there might be times where it literally feels and looks like 2 different teams, and I'm okay with that. And I'd like to see them run a little bit more when Chris Paul is off the floor.
Yeah, it's a situational thing depending on matchups, partially, and I get that. It actually brings up memories for me of a couple years ago with Igor Kokoshkov. You remember? Do you remember? I mean, that was the first season we did this podcast, right? So, do you remember how frequently we complained about the Suns being just the worst rebounding team in the NBA, which I think they literally were, and it was because they had DeAndre Ayton to do exactly what you were talking about. He occupied one body on the defensive glass, but then you were starting T.J. Warren at power forward, who's like roughly the same size as Jay Crowder. He's not any taller. He's thinner for sure, but a similarly sized guy. And the Suns just sucked. They were a good transition team, but they just couldn't get defensive rebounds, and it killed them. So it definitely is a balance. The other thing that I think is interesting in this conversation is when you talk about, okay, Chris Paul comes off the floor, it's time to run. Something that's betrayed my eye test so far, and I just verified the stat to make sure. Again, the stats haven't updated since the end of the Clippers game, but since before that, Cam Payne, the pace is actually even lower when Cam Payne is on the floor so far this season versus when Chris Paul is on the floor.
Right.
Which is something that surprised me. Just from my eye test, I would be like, okay, Chris Paul's off the floor. Let's get Cam Payne in. He's going to be the volume shooter. And he's a little bit out of control with the ball sometimes, I'm not going to lie. But theoretically, the idea is give Cam Payne the ball. You're trusting him to be your 6th man, your spark plug, and let him go. That hasn't, according to the stats, that hasn't exactly materialized so far in the way I expected.
That's really interesting. That's not something that I would have expected either, especially because there has been a tendency to that Cameron Payne's not really on the floor a lot with Chris Paul. Like, that's just not really happening that much. It's mostly with Devin Booker, and you would think that when Chris Paul's off the floor, they would run it a little bit more. And yeah, that's surprising for me as well. Today, actually, there was interesting moments of the game where Cameron Payne, Chris Paul, and Devin Booker were all on the floor together, which I don't think has happened that much going into this game.
We saw some fun lineups for the first time. We saw that 3-guard lineup.
I don't hate that too, by the way.
Sorry?
That's interesting. It's an interesting lineup.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, I don't know if it worked today. You know what else?
Yeah, it's probably not the right team for it.
You know what else was on the floor for like 2 minutes, and I couldn't really... Jay Crowder played center for a little bit. DeAndre Ayton picked up his 5th foul. I guess they didn't want Dario in there, and so Jay played. You know what it was? I think Paul George might have been like the tall. Like Ibaka was off the floor. Batum was even maybe. I don't really remember, but I think Paul George might have been the tallest player for the Clippers out there on the floor. So Monty said, "Okay, fuck it, we're gonna match them, and Jay's gonna be our center." Yeah. It was like for 2 minutes,
and then they put Ibaka in, and Saric came back in.
I mean, I thought it was fascinating. I
actually think you could get away with that with Saric on the floor as well. There has 100%. To be a focus by all 5 guys to rebound. But what the Clippers were doing, Clippers, by the way, the only team going into this game that had a slower pace than the Suns. So right there in the bottom of pace. So you can tell just looking at the final score of this game, right? It wasn't exactly a super high scoring game. And it picked up at the end too.
It's weird that we say that about a game 112 to 107 in 2020. Because
the rest of the scores tonight: 123 to 122, 122 to 120, 127 to 114, 118 to 108.
Right. Trust me, I know exactly what you mean. It's just funny because like flashback to 2005 and like 7 seconds takes the league by storm, and it's like, oh my God, the Phoenix Suns, they're averaging 108 points per game. Like it's some, crazy, insane thing. And I always just think it's funny. It's a tangentially related conversation, but I always just think it's funny when people kind of reminisce about that era even now and still think of it as like like 7 seconds was cool, but it wasn't literally 7 seconds, if that makes sense. Like, teams play faster now, and I don't think everyone necessarily realizes that. It definitely kickstarted a revolution, though, for sure.
Yeah, now that you mentioned that, somebody online tomorrow remind me to look up the stats for the pace for the 7 seconds or less Suns and compare it to what the Suns are playing at now. I bet it's not that different, just to illustrate how much the game has changed. But to go back to that point, the Clippers were slower than the Suns going into this game. And one of the things they do is they force switches, and they have two guys that can punish switches with Kawhi Leonard, who likes to go in the post, Paul George, who likes to shoot step backs and get to the rim. And if they're continually doing that against the Suns, teams like them specifically are exactly the type of teams where I think you should probably experiment with Jay Crowder at center. And they were willing to put Chris Paul on Paul George, which worked pretty well, actually. And if you're willing to do that, you have to have some sort of willingness to play around with that Jay Crowder at center lineup a little bit more. Cameron Johnson struggled, I think, a little bit in this game, and that's probably why they weren't willing to do that a little bit more. But I like that, and I hope they do that a little bit more, and that's something I'm sure we're going to talk about going forward. I do want to ask you something.
Yeah.
Javon Carter, 3 minutes and 20 seconds in this game. Langston Galloway also only 4 minutes. Javon Carter struggling a little bit shooting the ball. He had a good game in Utah. And he's played relatively well, but it seems like they might be phasing out his minutes a little bit. Do you think that's something that's happening, or
I don't think that's happening as much as it's just, I think Javon has always been the type of guy where if you're getting a lot out of him on a certain night, you want him out there for 20 to 25 minutes and to like play a large role in your defense. But if he's not hitting his shots, there isn't a reason to play him more than 3 or 4. So I think he's just one of those high variance playing time guys. I think he's going to finish out the season averaging close to 10 to 15, barring any injuries that force him to take a bigger role. But it's just we're going to see a bunch of games kind of on either end of the spectrum like this. And, tonight I have faith in Javon. After what I saw last year, I think he's a 40% three-point shooter when the season is all said and done. He's just in a shooting slump right now, and they need him to work through it. Until he gets through it, he's not going to play that much. The last thing I have to say about this game, and then we should probably move on, is you were talking about Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. I thought I was scared when I saw Mikal Bridges, and this is kind of crazy, but I was scared when I saw Mikal Bridges lined up against Iron Man to start the game, which is how I'm going to refer to masked Kawhi Leonard. Just because I thought he was too strong for him. Like that's one of the matchups. That's one of the few matchups in the NBA that traditionally punishes Mikal Bridges. And 4 for 21 from the field. It's pretty incredible.
Look, I'm not going to give the Suns any credit for that. Kawhi Leonard was getting the shots he normally gets.
Yeah, you're right.
He was just missing them.
He was. Yeah. Well, yeah, it was just a little bit of relief, right? Paul George killed us tonight, but Kawhi couldn't buy a bucket.
What's funny about Kawhi Leonard's mask? It looks like it was designed to give you COVID. Like it has a hole in the mouth, it has a hole in the nose, and it has a hole in the eyes. Everything else is covered up. It's like it's filtering whatever COVID is around him directly into the places that could give it to him. Sorry, one more thing, and it's not really necessarily about this game, but Cameron Johnson 2 for 8 from 3 in this game. Not that I'm worried at all about the shot, but that's 8 3-point attempts in this game. I believe he had 8 in the previous game. It's getting up there. I mean, we talked about the 7 3-point attempts would put him in the top 15 in 3-point attempts. We talked about it in last season. It's starting to get there. I think he's starting to be more and more willing to put up shots, and I think that's going to mean for him nights like tonight where he shoots 25% from 3. That's okay, because there will be nights going forward where all of a sudden he's shooting 65% from 3 or something at a higher rate. But that total 3-point attempt rate, that's climbing. I think we saw it a little lower. Now I saw there was a pump fake in this game where a guy flew by him and he didn't dribble into the lane. He actually shot the 3 still. I was very excited about that. That's more and more of that is what we need.
Tonight, Cam Johnson was the living embodiment of the Dion Waiters meme of I'd rather shoot 0 for 30 than 0 for 9 or whatever the hell he said a couple of years ago, because you don't want to lose confidence. Shooters never lose confidence. And honestly, Cam Johnson, the way he has been shooting the ball, he should have had like 15 or 20 points tonight because the Suns offense by design was creating him some fantastic looks. He just missed, and it's okay, through effort and crashing the glass and all the stuff we talked about, they were able to come back. There are going to be games like this. there aren't going to be a lot of games where your opponent shoots 60% from three going forward. So
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's take a quick break. We're going to talk about the Suns are still technically number one in the Western Conference right now at a 5-2 record. We're going to talk about some things that we think has contributed to their hot start so far this season, and we're going to bring back another segment. So we'll be right back. Hey everyone, I want to tell you about Blue Wire Hustle, a brand new program where you can host your very own podcast here at Blue Wire. Hustle was created to give everyone the opportunity to take your podcast to the next level. Or if you want to host a podcast and just don't know where to start, Hustle is the perfect place for you. As part of the program, you'll receive personal cover art with Q&As from Blue Wire's top podcasters, access to our community Discord, and an e-learning course full of tips and tricks. And on top of that, we'll help you get your show pushed out to Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, and all other listening platforms. And the best part is, you can get all of this for only $15 a month, the same rate as any other hosting site would charge you just for the initial setup. So whether you're starting from scratch or have an existing show that you want to grow, Hustle is an open door to leveling up your sports experience. Acceptance into the program is limited, so get your application in today. To apply, go to bwhustle.com/join. Check out the description box for this episode to find out more, but that's bwhustle.com/join. All right, Sam, I paid somebody to make another song for us. We're bringing back Player of the Week. This season is actually back now. It feels a little bit regular compared to, say, the bubble or what we experienced previously in the preseason. That means that we're bringing back segments, starting with Player of the Week this week. Player of the Week is a segment where I choose a Player of the Week and Sam chooses a Player of the Week for whatever reason. It could be Suns, it could be non-Suns if we want to. It could be to talk about how bad they've been. It could be to talk about how good they've been. Whatever we want. But what I like to do for this segment is to play random songs that people make, theme songs for Player of the Week. That means you listening to this, if you'd like to make a Player of the Week song, feel free to make one. We'll tell you how. Just reach out to us. We'll tell you how to send it over to us. But for now,
I went
how
on
you
Fiverr. Admitted that we just talk about whatever we want in this segment, like under the guise of using a segment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
it's structure, but it's not really structure if you think about it.
Usually it's the players that we'd like to talk about specifically for whatever reason for the Suns, and that usually means they played well. But I went on Fiverr, which is a website where you can pay random people to do random things, and I paid someone, an Eastern European rapper. I'm not sure what country he's from, but it's definitely not the United States based on the time zone he's in, to write a song for Player of the Week. For Fiverr, you give them a few details, they send you back a song, and this is the song that he sent. Here you go, Sam. This will be the first time Sam is hearing it.
Yeah. Sun's hot, but there's gotta be a spark. Bring it to the game like a light in the dark. And mark my words, you might just hear it here first. Enormous performances, hardwood's about to burst. Sometimes a game hinges up on a player like Bridges or Booker with a no-looker or three-point shot from the fringes. We let the ball do the talking and we're all watching them speak. So here's a conversation about our Player of the Week.
There it is.
Wait, are you sure we haven't used this one before?
I don't know that we have.
I can't remember anymore.
I think there's a chance that I sent it to you.
So here's the thing. We welcome all genres of submissions. First of all, that was pretty good. I can't remember if we've used it in an episode before because we've cycled through. We went through an indie pop phase, like a bedroom kind of folk phase, and then I think we've done other rappers. Again, how much did you pay for that? $5?
$10, I think was his name was Petrovita, by the way.
$10. What info did you send him? Does he know about
Phoenix Suns? I said this is Phoenix Suns, and two basketball players are named Devin Booker and Mikal Bridges.
Okay, well there you go. He used Mikal Bridges' name, so I'd say dude did a great job.
Yeah, and if you heard that before, I'm sorry. If you haven't, that's fine because I actually have another one for next week. I have to find it that somebody sent us that we can play next week from a fan. But shout out to Petrovita for that. All right, Player of the Week. I have a player. You have a player. Would you like to go first, or would you like me to go first?
You go first.
Okay, my Player of the Week is Cameron Payne. Cameron Payne First of all, he's shooting 50% from three on the Suns still to this day, exactly 50% from three. It seems like he might go up and might go down, but he'll never drop below that mark so far. That's through 15 games, by the way, bubble and this season combined. But before the season, we talked about how important this backup guard position is. Now, it's regardless of if there are minutes without Devin Booker and Chris Paul, which so far have not been terrible. This specific game against the Clippers, they were terrible. But I think beyond that, outside of that, for the previous 6 games, pretty good. Not terrible so far. So much about that has been what Cameron Payne has done. He has put pressure on the defense in very interesting ways. He's able to find guys. I'm not even going to go through his averages because I don't think they matter that much. But he can find guys with assists. He can pull up in transition, which is something that makes me nervous every time he does it, I'll be honest. But he's continually shooting 50% from three, not on a huge number of attempts, but enough that it matters. But his ability to penetrate and even attack switches, like if a big man switches out to him, he's going to get to the rim.
He loves that.
Has been so huge for this team because as good as Devin Booker is at finding other guys and as much as we think he's capable of being a point guard, even if he is the best possible point guard he can be, the NBA needs multiple shot creators on the floor at all times. That's the best way to be good. And if Cameron Payne can continue to do what he's doing, which is be a capable NBA shot creator who can create for himself and can create for others, that's going to be a huge, huge, huge boost for this team. And that's outside of his effort on the defense, which is Javon Carter-esque. He's constantly giving it his all. We've seen him switch on to guys like Zion or Gobert, I think, for a possession or two, and he's held his own as a point guard. So I picked Cameron Payne. I thought he's been excellent, and a huge, important player, role player ultimately. But when you're a point guard role player, it's hard to be like a role player in the traditional sense because of how much the ball is in your hands. So he's been really good. What have you thought of Cameron Payne so far?
He's been amazing. I wrote, this was a week ago, so, a little bit outdated, but I wrote a column for Bright Side of the Sun just about Cam Payne and his hot start. I mean, his finishing, you touched on it, the ability to switch onto bigs and just cook them in the open floor. He really can do that with his live dribble, and his effort on defense is commendable. I think that's part of a team scheme thing. They just really want to put the focus on defensive rebounding, and that's a team effort, and Cam Payne has played his part. As you mentioned, whether it's Zion or Rudy Gobert, I think there's another clip you got of him switching onto someone who's 80 pounds heavier than him at some point this season, but the name is escaping me. But yeah, he's been awesome. Let me just turn it back on you real quick. We talked about George Hill as a name before the season started. I think we were just kind of trying to explore emergency backup plans, and have you changed your mind about that at all? Like, would you still love George Hill on this team or
absolutely?
Okay. So, how much faith do you have in Cam Payne, really?
It always, there's a famous clip of, I forget who it is. It's one of those old-timey comedians where he's on a train and they're like laying maybe it's a cartoon. They're like laying the tracks on the train as the train is moving. It feels a little bit like that. Like it feels like Cameron Payne is constantly laying the tracks in front of the train as it's moving, just one step ahead of disaster. And, that's what he needs to be. And as much as I want to say it's not for real, it still has been for real. At some point, if it's not, that would be a disaster for the Suns. It's difficult to replace guys who are creating for others. But when you're making a move like George Hill, you're looking ahead to the playoffs and you're saying this guy is an excellent defender who has experience, has been on, I'm not sure if he's on those championship Spurs teams. I imagine he's won at least one championship with the Spurs. It seems like he would have. But he's got lots and lots of playoff experiences, and he's a guy who can make you a better team deep into the playoffs, and there's not a lot of those guys available. George Hill, the problem with George Hill is if you want to trade for him now during the season, it's difficult to match salary with a guy like George Hill without giving up players that do matter for this team. He makes like $10 million. He also has a partially guaranteed contract for next year. So the idea of George Hill being bought out this season, it's not likely. They'd have to pay enough to somehow make that worth his while with a guy who's partially guaranteed for next year. So no, I think
killed
if
that idea because I hadn't thought it through. I was just like, yeah, George Hill's great. I hadn't really thought about the logistics, and you make it seem difficult.
Yeah, I've already sort of, if they buy him out, yeah. I mean, obviously the Suns left the BAE open. That's something where if every other team only has a veterans minimum, the Suns can offer more. And I think that matters for the Suns, and I think that's why they kept it open for specifically for guys like George Hill, or in a lot of cases, I think for the Suns, if a big man gets bought out for another team, they can get that big man because the depth is bad, as we've seen when Dario Saric is out. It's not that great. It's Kaminsky now, who did well, by the way, in the last few games, but is not somebody that you want seeing the floor a lot. Yeah, it's not player of the week.
I'm kidding.
Yeah. Who do you have for player of the week?
I have this guy, he's it's just, I'm not going to make a stupid joke about it. I have DeAndre Ayton as my player of the week. I was trying to think of something quick-witted, but I'm not that quick. DeAndre Ayton, I think, deserves some credit from all of us, right? I mean, look, what's factoring into what I'm considering this week is everything since our most recent episode. That's the game against Utah, the game against Denver, and the game tonight against LA. And the game against Utah was a bit of a turd. But after that, we're going to ignore that one selectively. 24 points. Sorry, I already screwed up. 22 points against Denver, 10 of 13 shooting, 11 rebounds, 2 blocks, and some lockdown defensive anchor type defense that he played in that one. And then tonight, 24 points, 9 of 12 shooting, 6 of 7 from the free throw line. Actually got to the free throw line. I alluded to it earlier. 4 offensive rebounds tonight. Had 0 in the first half. They simply don't come back in this game without his contribution on the offensive glass, and they don't win against Denver without his contribution on both ends. So, yeah, I mean, look, he's had a rough start to the season, at least his first 4 or 5 games. He kind of seemed to be struggling to find his offensive role, and now the past 2 games, 22 points and 24 points. And I think the craziest thing about it, especially if you look at a game like tonight, it's not DeAndre Ayton commanding 20 post touches. All along, we've been saying that it never would be that. It doesn't take DeAndre Ayton 20 field goal attempts to get to 24 points. He just needs to make a concerted effort to roll each and every time, with the understanding that in some games, he's just not going to get, he's not going to get the ball because the defense is going to be collapsing in on him, and it's going to be Devin Booker, Chris Paul, or the open shooters in the corners who are going to be profiting off of his roll gravity. But in some games, like tonight, he's going to get the offensive rebounds and the putbacks and the pick and roll finishes, and it could be very, very easy for him with that level of aggression getting to the free throw line to get up to 20 or more points per game. It really wouldn't be that difficult.
It's funny with DeAndre Ayton, the level of confidence I have in the jump shot specifically, when it's from the baseline and when it's from like the free throw line area. I hate the free throw line area one, and I kind of love the little baseline turnaround, specifically when there are big guys guarding him.
He's never missed that shot.
Yeah.
I'm calling it right now. I'm not going to look up the stats because I know exactly what you're talking about. When he spins towards the baseline and takes that turnaround shot, he hits it every time.
Especially when it's not like he's not dribbling and trying to create space. He just goes into it as soon as he catches it.
He has to spend like 45 minutes warming up at that like one spot every day, like because he's just automatic from that one spot. That's the LaMarcus Aldridge turnaround. But if he tries to spin the other direction, hopeless, really bad shot. So I don't understand.
Or and the other part is dribbling. We've asked for him to dribble more. I think we've seen early on in this season why it doesn't happen that much. He struggles with it, and that's fine. We've talked about it a lot. There's so much more he can do for this team. Defense, he's been great, specifically in that Denver game. Like, if you want to watch an example of how good he can be and how much he can matter on defense, just rewatch that Denver game, because there's nothing they can do. He was protecting the rim, doing the traditional rim protector stuff. And then Jamal Murray, who was insanely hot to start that game, he was shutting him down on his own, by himself, really with no help from others. And that's the type of defensive versatility that could make him possibly the most versatile center on defense in the NBA, if you don't count Anthony Davis, basically. And that's huge. And there are times, like with DeAndre, and there are times where he just makes huge mistakes, and they're very obvious. And that's the thing about when you're a center, is the defensive mistakes that you make are obvious, because all of a sudden the rim is wide open. 1 or 2 of those a game, fine. if he continues to play the way he did in the last 2 games, where it's just not often that those huge glaring mistakes are being made, this team's going to be very, very good. And, there was a few of them in the first quarter of this Clippers game, but as it went along, one of the main reasons the Suns were able to catch up and make this more of a game was DeAndre Ayton's effort on the defensive end and his effort on rebounding. And you talked about it. Rolling to the rim is so important because if he can't dribble, which he's not done a great job at so far, when he's in the trees, when he's under the basket and he catches it, we're not going to count on him to escape out of there. He can get the ball out on some passes, those sort of over-the-head passes that he fires to the corners. But if he continues to go up with it when he's in those trees, there's nothing they can do. He's very, very strong, and that means that they're going to have to foul him in order to stop him from getting a shot up at the rim. And he's a good free throw shooter, as we saw tonight, and he can get some easy points that way. So today, I thought specifically, was a great example of rolling and how important those rolls can be. And I think the Suns are finding different ways to get him the ball. Jay Crowder has played a major role in that in the last 2 games because they're stopping those passing lanes for Chris Paul. They're trying to stop him for Devin Booker, and that means that extra pass is going to matter a little bit more for him. But yeah, this game specifically against the Clippers, if he continues to do what he did in this game on offense, it's going to be really hard to guard the Suns. So an impressive, specifically 2-game stretch for DeAndre Ayton. So great pick there. Do you have anything else you'd like to say about DeAndre Ayton?
No, I think we basically covered it. Tonight, I guess the last thing I'll say tonight, defensively, the same stuff that worked against Denver, switching on to Jamal Murray and all of them, they tried it again. And I thought fundamentally he was sound, and it just shows how much faith they have in him in the first place to even do that. He just picked up a couple of ticky-tack fouls against Paul George, and Paul George couldn't miss. And it was one of those matchups. DeAndre can shift his feet, and he's very nimble for a guy in his frame, but that's not it's not an automatic cheat code. There's still going to be guys he switches against who cook him. And Tonight was just one of those nights.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, last thing we wanted to get to is each of us were trying to pick 2 specific reasons we thought the Suns got out to a hot start, just to quickly cover before the end of this podcast, because I think this has been a very interesting start for the Suns. Obviously, they're good, and they've played well, and there are things to point out, and we wanted to point out a couple of things there. I'll go first since you just went with DeAndre Ayton there. And I wanted to point out this one specifically because I think Devin Booker has taken some heat from Suns fans for his turnovers. And one of the things the Suns have actually been very, very good at so far this season is not turning the ball over. They're actually currently, after this game, 6th in the NBA for the least amount of turnovers per game. And Chris Paul is a huge reason why. Obviously, this guy is just a guy who just doesn't turn the ball over much at all. And that's huge. And you really get to see it because he doesn't make a lot of stupid mistakes with the ball. And he's more likely to just hold it for a second to make sure that somebody runs out to him if the defense collapses. He doesn't get rid of the ball and panic at all. And for as much as Devin Booker struggled early, this team is still 6th. And going into this game, it was 5th. By the way, Sam, if you'd like to refresh your browser here, the stats have updated on NBA.com if you want to see some updated stats. But now the Suns are 6th, tied actually with the Clippers for the least amount of turnovers. And I think that's something that the Suns will continue to do well. And as Devin Booker cuts them down, I think that they could be near the top in the league for the least amount of turnovers and probably the best in the league at assist to turnover ratio because of how good some of the passers are on this team. I said it on Twitter. I don't think they're going to lead the league in assists like they did last season, but I think they could lead the league in assist to turnover ratio. So that's the first thing I wanted to point out is not turning the ball over. They're just not making a ton of stupid mistakes, and I think that's going to go a long ways for this team. What do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely mostly that Chris Paul guy, but also Campaign has been really good with that too. I think he's got, like a 4.0 assist turnover ratio. I don't have the stats right in front of me. Mikal Bridges too got his first turnover of the season this year. I was today.
This game, yeah.
Yeah, this game. I was
a very dramatic one too.
I was very, very sad to see it. I had been making jokes about how you can't even calculate his assist turnover ratio. Very stupid, nerdy math shit. But you can't calculate his assist turnover ratio because it would be division by 0, which is like the worst thing you can do in math. Now I can't make that joke anymore because he has 1 turnover. But yeah, I mean, look, schematically, they're just doing a great job, and we've talked about it, but this is what 0.5 is, and this is what it does.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you have for your first one?
I just want to talk about the defense, and I know that's a very generic thing, so I guess I just have a few things to say about it, and I think it's an interesting conversation. Like, I guess the reason I wanted to have all of these conversations in the first place, I think it's easy for people on the outside looking in. I think now that the Suns are 5-2, there would have been a little bit more national media hype if they went into tomorrow's a Monday, at 6-1. You know, tomorrow's a Monday. The national media members, a lot of them work a Monday to Friday schedule. I was preparing for them to beat the Clippers. That's what I was hoping for. And that then there would be this explosion, just an absolute avalanche of national media coverage if the Suns were 6-1 starting on tomorrow. And what I convinced myself is that it hasn't happened yet because it's been a holiday weekend. So, these people have jobs and they have off time just like us. And, they just hadn't gotten around to writing those puff pieces yet. I still think some of those puff pieces are coming, but I think for the people who aren't paying attention, it's very easy just to kind of wish it all away and attribute it all to Chris Paul, or to Monty Williams or something. But I really think there's quite a lot that goes into it. Obviously, the defense has been a lot of this is Monty Williams, but the defense has been the thing that surprised us most, right? Like, I just looked at the updated stats, so thank you for tipping me off to that. Mm-hmm. The Suns are still 3rd in defensive rating after that loss against the Clippers. They are top 10 in defensive rebound percentage, which is just a very big stat. I think that shows exactly what they're trying to do. Even with DeAndre Ayton kind of being the only big body on the roster, to be top 10 in defensive rebounding percentage shows a real commitment to crashing the glass, like we've talked about. They're trying to force turnovers. I think they're around average in that area. And then the other thing is that they had gotten a little bit lucky previously with opponents shooting poorly from three-point range. However, Utah, I went back and looked at the box scores. Utah shot 35% from deep. We still won that game. Denver shot 41% from deep. We still won that game. The Clippers just shot 58% or something ridiculous. We almost won that game. So obviously by doing the little things on defense, and this is the main point here because I know I've been rambling for a while, by doing the little things on defense, they've been able to create a scheme that is not just good, but potentially great. And it's made me a real believer over these first 7 games, because I think there are foundational pieces here that we talk about frequently. Mikal Bridges being the guy who's going to lock down the other team's primary weapon. DeAndre Ayton being the switchable defensive nightmare who can switch, which is not a thing that you usually see in a 7-footer. Jay Crowder being a strong guy who can kind of muscle up in the post. We've talked about all those guys. All those guys are critical to the overall defensive system that you're trying to build. However, like, that's enough to make you a good defensive team, but you don't get 3rd in defensive rating without getting a collective buy-in from all the little pieces. And I think that's the more interesting thing for us to talk about, because it's the little pieces that have done the surprising stuff, that have filled in the cracks, and have made this just a cohesive defensive team. Everyone from Devin Booker to showing increased willingness to fight through screens and blow up dribble handoffs, which is not something that he's had really the reason to play for. I mean, I guess you could argue he had the reason to play for in previous seasons just because it's something you should do, but he didn't do it in previous seasons, and now he's doing it. And it's because he can tell that the Suns are actually on the cusp of achieving something and winning, right, and he looks like a more motivated defender. Cam Payne is a guy we've talked about. He's got long arms, but he's not like traditionally thought of as a lockdown defender. He's not a guy who technically has that defensive IQ, but just his effort and exactly what we were talking about earlier in this episode, and exactly what you've been tweeting about all season long. When you watch Cam Payne muscle up against Zion and whoever else it was, Gobert, in the post to get defensive rebounds, that is something that is inspiring and also points towards a collective buy-in. Cam Johnson is another guy. We've seen in games both against the Mavs when Mikal was matched up against Luka Doncic, and against the Jazz when Mikal was matched up against Donovan Mitchell. Both of those offensive assignments got so frustrated with Mikal that what did they do in the second half? They were doing anything they possibly could to draw the switch. Whenever Cam Johnson was on the floor, that meant they wanted the supposed mismatch on Cam Johnson. And in limited sample size, admittedly, but when that sort of stuff has happened and Cam Johnson has had to be switched on to a great offensive talent, no, he's not Mikal Bridges, but he holds his own just fine. And he looks like a totally average to maybe even slightly above average defender who's like, always in the right place, getting his hands up to contest the shot. He's getting a decent amount of steals, a decent amount of blocks.
Yeah.
So just overall, collectively, yes, there are a few great defenders on this team, but there isn't a weak link right now. And I think that's what's most exciting to see for me, because especially when you play as switch heavy as the Suns defense has been to start the season, your defense is actually only as strong as its weakest link. And there is no obvious weakest link right now. I do think Devin Booker still has a lot of the same issues that we've seen in the past, a lot of the same ball watching issues. But I think
that one issue, I think.
Yeah, I mean, but I don't want.
I think
it
every
to take
other
away.
issue he had is starting to go away.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts about it now because I've had the floor for like 5 minutes here. But just the defense has just been so impressive, and I think again, it's not just a few guys; it's everyone.
Well, I think you covered a lot there, and I think something we didn't talk about with Devin Booker, that maybe his struggles offensively were as simple as he's putting in more effort on defense, and that's tiring, and that's okay. Like Jimmy Butler is commonly a guy that you look at for that. Maybe his role is not as much, James Harden like it was the last 2 years, and maybe a little bit more Jimmy Butler now, and that's okay because of how good the team could be within that role. But the ball watching, I think, is still going to happen a little bit, specifically when he's guarding a guy in the corner, because the more Devin Booker is engaged defensively, the better he can be. I think if he gets a little bit bored when a guy is standing there a little too long, that's when they can back cut on him. That's when they can catch him with that easy corner three on a slow closeout. But he's closing out harder than he was last season. He's not dying on screens, something that bothered me a lot. He's fighting through and helping out DeAndre Ayton ultimately in a lot of those pick and roll plays where the job is on both of them to fight through every single screen there. So overall, I think he's been really good, but I think a lot of that has to do with the effort from every single person, and I think that means Monty Williams deserves a ton of credit there, and I think Chris Paul as well. I think Chris Paul is the type of guy that's barking in every single guy's ear and telling them how to defend on specific plays. And I was going to talk about Monty Williams and rotations for my other one, but I'm going to audible now because somebody you brought up that I want to spend a little bit more time on here is Jay Crowder, because of how important I think Jay Crowder has been for this team in this specific run that they've been on. It's been fascinating to watch Jay Crowder on like a game-to-game basis. You watch Jay Crowder when he's on the Heat or when he's on the Celtics or whatever other 6 teams he's played on, and you see him like once or twice a season, and you get to experience a Jay Crowder experience. He kind of fades into the background there. Yes, he's a good defender, but you don't really pick up on a lot of the little things that he does, and so much of that is finding the right moment to help off for other guys. He's so good at finding the right time to help. He's not leaving his guys open. There's so many guys that try to attack him off the dribble. Once or twice they run into that wall, and then they just pass out and go to someone else. You know what that means? That means that he's not getting a block. He's not getting a steal. He's not even getting those defensive stats that are like the stats that I personally hate, I'll be honest, where it's like he's holding a guy to 10% below his season average. I don't like those stats at all.
That's a personal attack at some people I know, myself included. I actually do like those stats.
No, they're fine. Like they measure one specific thing, though. You know what I mean? It's not really the entire defense. You can't use that to say somebody's a good defender only. You have to look at the bigger picture.
You could argue that denying someone's drive and then forcing them to pass out where they don't even take the shot in the first place is better
or
defense.
Stopping them from getting the ball at all by not letting them pass the ball, fronting, stuff like that. Like those types of things.
It's just so hard to measure.
It's impossible. You have to watch the games. And I think that's why I wanted to bring up Jay Crowder, because I have a different level of appreciation for what his game is defensively after watching him for these 7 games and seeing how active he is, how strong he is, and how smart he is defensively. And also offensively, we've seen some of the passes. I think he's able to make that quick pass. He's not quite somebody that's going to create a lot of shots for others, right? He's not going to do it off the dribble or anything like that. But he is capable of just making that sort of hockey assists, if you will. And I thought that's been really impressive. But yeah, what do you think about Jay Crowder?
Dude. I mean, he's been amazing for all the reasons you said. On offense, he's been better than expected too. I think we have seen. I'll tip my cap to David Nash on this one because he's the one who brought my attention to it in one of his newsletters. That I mean, we always kind of knew it though that Jay's not actually a good shooter, if that makes sense. Like he's hitting wide open threes. But he doesn't, when guys are actually closing out on him and contesting his shots, he's not like a Cam Johnson or even arguably Mikal Bridges level shooter. He's just going to get a lot of open looks in this offense, and that's kind of how you're going to generate offense out of him. But outside of that limited role, I do think it's been pretty impressive on offense that I've seen him put the ball on the floor a few times and try to create. And what you said, that he's a pretty solid playmaker as well.
Yeah, and like it's a standstill assist, right? That's
Sure.
what he's going to be good at.
Sure.
Although there was a really interesting transition, no-look pass to DeAndre Ayton under the rim in this game against the Clippers that I thought was fascinating. But, like I said, I was going to talk about rotations and Monty Williams. We'll save that for a future episode. But I just wanted to give him just a little bit more shine before we ended this podcast. I know you have one more thing that you wanted to talk about, right?
I think we can cover this one really quickly, honestly, because we talked about them in the past, but you can't talk about why are the Suns at the top of the Western Conference without Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson. It's just, we have talked about it in previous episodes. So again, I feel like there's not much new to say. Neither one of them had like a crazy breakout performance in the past 3 games where they scored 30 points. Yeah. But they continue to do their thing. Mikal is
conversely, why they struggled in this game is because they didn't really do their thing, right?
That's true.
Why the Suns struggled a little bit.
Right. Well, I mean, it ebbs and flows. That is certainly a con. But the pro, as we talked about at the beginning, we saw a more assertive Devin Booker. So, they kind of feed off each other a little bit.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, and Cam was not shy about shooting tonight. Mikal Bridges has not been shy about shooting. I think 7. And you know what? There's going to be nights like that. I think we've seen a little bit less of them in the past few games of creating for themselves off the dribble, but we've still seen enough of it that I believe in it. I totally buy that that's something, it's in their game, it's in their repertoire, it's something they're working on, and we're going to see it more and more throughout the season, which that right there is encouraging.
What we talked about on our last episode is any concerns for Devin Booker, and tonight we saw exactly what happens. If those shots are not falling for Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson, then we need Devin Booker, and Devin Booker stepped up tonight. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough, and really, I don't blame him for that, obviously. 45 minutes, basically, and 25 points on 13 shots. He did as much as he could. But going forward, I think you have to recognize those types of things. Maybe on nights that Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson are going to struggle, step up a little earlier. Another thing I want to mention just about them, since we're on it before we end here, 1 for 7 for Mikal Bridges, but watch how they defended him. They defended him like he was Klay Thompson in this game. It's the first time we've really seen it, where teams are now recognizing that maybe he's a little bit more of a threat from the three-point line than he was last year, and they're treating him like that, trying to run him off those three-point shots, trying to close out on him as much as possible, or even denying the ball. And we haven't really seen that a lot yet. So it was really interesting to see that with Mikal Bridges now. Very, very excited about those two guys and their growth, because if they continue to be capable of scoring like they have been to start this season, the ceiling of this team is very, very high. Last thing I'll say, if you're listening to this whole podcast and you're waiting to hear Kevin O'Connor's voice.
I was wondering if you were going to bring it up, because I was, if you weren't going to.
Yeah, I'll just say we're working on it. We're trying. We're hoping to get him on in a future episode. He seems to be willing to do it. I will say, if you're going to ask him to come on our podcast, thank you, especially to Max Hodder, who asked him. Just be nice to him. If you're going to tweet at him and ask him to come on the Timeline podcast, just be nice to him. We would love to have him on, obviously. I think it would be really fun to give him a chance to gloat about how he never stopped believing in the Suns.
The only other thing I'll say about that, we're working on it, but it's not a guarantee. And if it doesn't happen, know that it's not necessarily due to factors entirely in KOC's control. So
or our control. Obviously, we do whatever it takes.
either of our control is what I think is important to stress. So thank you for all the kind messages we got on social media about it. If you have no idea what we're talking about, don't even worry about it. Maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. But yeah, I have one more piece of housekeeping before we leave. We haven't begged for iTunes reviews or podcast reviews in a while. We're getting a decent amount of new Suns fans who seem to be interested in this season. I can't imagine why. But if you're relatively new to listening to the podcast and you decided to check us out and you like what you hear, feel free to hop on over to Apple Podcasts. I guess iTunes is technically dead, right? But to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. We always love to see that.
Yes, and thank you everyone for listening. Toronto, Detroit, Indiana. Detroit and Indiana on a back-to-back Friday and Saturday. That's the games this week. Interesting games. Toronto's been struggling. Detroit's been actually better than expected, and Indiana's one of the better teams in the league to start. No TJ Warren, though. So that'll be an interesting week. We'll be back next Sunday to cover that. If anything really interesting happens in the meantime, maybe we'll jump on the mic a little bit more, too.
Our team is resilient. They fight. All the stuff that, a city like ours can be proud of. And then when it came down the stretch, I thought the 2 threes that Serge hit really put us in a bit of a bind. I don't think he had scored until that point. And then he hit 2 big threes. And we still had a chance to tie it up. Got a decent look off, but just didn't work out for us. But I just love the way we scrapped and battled, and we know we can beat that team because we've done it before. We just got to get off to a better start than we.
This episode is brought to you by Ro. Confidence is everything. Women can sense it, and trust me, they love it. But if you're in your head worried about performance, that swag, unfortunately, gentlemen, it's gone. Ro Sparks keeps you ready. When the moment hits, you can step up like a superhero and handle your business. No doubt, just confidence.
Fellas, Ro Sparks gets you ready fast, dissolving under your tongue and working in 15 minutes on average. No waiting, no missing the moment, plus it stays active up to 36 hours.
So when the mood hits, you can go back to back to back, round after round after round. Ro connects guys with medical provider 100% online, so there's no awkward conversation with in-person providers. Go to ro.com/sparks to see if you qualify. If prescribed, new sexual health patients gets $15 off Sparks on reoccurring plan. Connect with the provider at ro.co/fourth to find out if prescriptions Ro Sparks are right for you. That's ro.co/fourth for $15 off your first order. If approved, treatment ships directly to their door. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, and or manufacturing review. For full safety information, go to ro.co/safety info.